Just give me a thumbs up. We're hot. All right. Good evening. We'll now call to order the Monday, February 6, 2023 Town Council meeting. If you would please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Up next on the agenda is the approval of the memorandum of the January 17th, 2023 regular Town Council meeting. A copy has been posted. Are there any questions or discussion from councilors?
Motion to approve.
Second. First by Councilor Melton, the second by Councilor Choi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is the approval of the February 6, 2023 claims. Are there any questions from councilors? I see Cindy in the room.
I did have just one question, and I think it's a pretty simple one. We've got, is it my understanding that the consulting fee for the RDC going forward, will that appear on their claims and not ours? Because I understand they went into a contract for that.
Actually, that's something that I would need to talk to them about because I was under the impression it was coming out of the RDC budget and not the planning budget. So I'll have to get with them on that.
Okay.
So on that topic, though, it looks like they just had that vote last month, right? And this still says consulting. So I believe that this would come out of these claims. And then from moving forward, everything will come out of the RDC budget. Just, I had the same question. I kind of dug a little bit and that's exactly what I found. So,
Okay.
and it's a different number as well. I believe the contracted number is a little bit less moving forward, but the RDC, so they worked the deal out. So.
Perfect. All right. I knew that shift was coming. I just didn't know when to expect to see it. Okay. And I've got another question just offline, but
Actually, I have a couple while you're here. Just wanted to touch base. A couple things. First of all, these are very confusing for me going from month to this is the new system. Is this what we're going to see? That's my first question.
Yes.
So moving forward, great. I'll try and get the hang of this with this layout. I just had a couple quick questions. It looks like we paid Witzik and Newton twice. I assume that's because is that a billing thing? Do they bill us or do we just pay them automatically?
No, they billed us. We held the January payment off the last claims because it should have come out of 2023 and not 2022 funds. That's the reason why you're seeing them
Perfect.
both on here.
Great. And then real quick on page 2, there is Security Pros LLC on there. And looks like there's two recurring annual service lines on there. I just want to make sure those aren't duplicates or I just was surprised to see it on there twice.
No, a lot of the buildings and areas, and Joe could answer this better than I could, but
Okay.
we have different maintenance agreements for the different buildings that we have online.
Okay, fantastic. And then that same thing goes, let's see, I actually believe that I have one more question. Actually, looks like we paid the Zionsville Chamber of Commerce their $60,000 for the community enrichment grant. Is that right?
That is correct.
And that comes out of 2023's budget, right?
Correct.
Okay, great. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm excited to see them getting those funding dollars as well. So actually, that's all I wanted to know.
Cindy, I just kind of separate maybe from this stuff. I noticed that we've got our retainer and it's listed as a 2023 retainer.
Mhm.
I've got a December bill due here.
Okay.
So I guess my question is, so we get bills with invoices. Is there a way to attach the invoices to these claims, or at least the numbers, so that I could look at that and compare it and say that, you know, this invoice, you know, number 3040955 from December is not the same thing that's listed here?
I'll see if there's a way to add the invoice number onto the claims.
Okay. Thank you. And then I'll give this to you so we can
Okay.
make sure that gets wrapped up too.
Yep.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions for Cindy? I would make a motion to approve claims.
Second.
Second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a request to speak on agenda items. Amy, I have one. Did you receive any others?
No, just the one.
Very good. All right. I have one for Pat Cross. Yeah, yep. If you would just come up and state your name and your address, and we've got 3 minutes, so I'll give you a quick heads up when we get to 2, so you know that's coming down.
Okay.
That's not the
Cross.
timer, by the way. I don't know who's that.
Yeah, that's time's up. Pat Cross, reside at 4998 Turkey Foot Road. I've lived in Zionsville for more than 20 years. Appreciate the opportunity to chat with you about the golf cart ordinance amendment. Thank you, President Plunkett, for sponsoring that. I've met and corresponded with a large number of Zionsville residents who are very supportive of the proposed amendment to the golf cart ordinance. We believe that street legal golf carts can operate safely on most public streets in our town, providing a number of environmental and other benefits to the community. We had hoped, so we'll take that good news. As I said, we're very supportive. There is one suggestion, recommendation that we'd like to make to that amendment, and that would be to permit the use of the Turkey Foot Trail to access Holiday Farms Golf Club, so that families living in Holiday Farms could more easily and safely access the village. And for folks who live to the south of Holiday Farms but who are members or go there to enjoy the amenities in the community, could access it from the south. We'll note that at the end, I'll mention a less than a sentence amendment that we're proposing. As you think about that, 2/3 of the trail already permits golf carts. And I think technically the amendment as proposed, it would violate the amendment, the ordinance, because there are golf carts on the northern part of the trail, and the amendment says they're not permitted on any trail. We're only talking about the north-south leg, so the part that goes to Willow Road, that wouldn't need to have golf cart usage. The reason, I assume, one of the main reasons that the ordinance is adopted and why there are more carts is because there's a golf club right there, and it seems to make sense to us that there should be access using it. This would entail removing the bollards so that golf carts could get through, but larger vehicles could not get through. The Turkey Foot Trail is the widest trail in the community. It's 13 feet wide, and we believe it can safely permit golf carts, bicyclists, and walkers and runners to use the trail. So what we're simply asking for is a proviso to be added to the amendment to permit that portion of Turkey Foot, approximately 1/3 of the trail, to also be used in addition to the northern part of the trail. And we appreciate your consideration of that.
Thank you. Up next on the agenda would be the mayor administration update, and we did not receive any information from the mayor or the administration. So moving on to the town council update. Are there any updates from councilors?
Just a quick update on the Van Gorder insurance claim. I did get my public records requests back, and it was, I want to thank you, President Plunkett, for being adamant about reaching out and trying to push this thing forward. Unfortunately, I saw no indication that anybody else is doing that from the administration side per the public records request. From what I could gather through that, the claim was submitted at the first week of September. And that by email, at least, that was the only real correspondence they had. This is a 5-month-old claim at this point. I've been asking about it for 2 months now, and still have gotten no real response about what actions are being taken to get this finalized. No settlement has been reached, no offer has been made, nothing's been paid out. And I'd just like to point out that every meeting that goes by and we don't get some resolution to this or pay it, the bill only goes up. So I would encourage the administration to be a little bit more aggressive with trying to settle this, as not to end up on the bad end of another lawsuit.
I would agree. Any other updates from counselors? Up next is old business, and there is no old business. Moving on to new business. First item up is a consideration of approval of appointments to Pathways and Pizzazz Committee. This is, counselors, you'll recall at the last meeting, we held off on Pathways appointments. And since then, we had a couple of Pizzazz members come off of that particular board. So we have other appointments that are out there. So are there any questions from counselors?
Just a quick comment regarding that. I appreciate you all being flexible to let me postpone our appointments. I just want to encourage anybody that gets appointed, please try to make a good effort to show up to these meetings. And that was our biggest concern, and hopefully we won't have that problem in the future.
Yeah, I would just like to say once again, I appreciate everybody who volunteers to serve on these committees. Obviously, there's a significant amount of work that goes into it, and those boards and commissions are incredibly important to the day-to-day functions of the town. So thank you for stepping up and doing that. If there are no other questions from counselors, I'll make a motion to approve the appointments to Pathways and Pizzazz. Second by Counselor Culp. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next on the agenda is a consideration of approval of the amended 2023 schedule of meetings. This is to note the Plan Commission meeting time change from 7 to 6:30. I don't necessarily have anybody here to present on that. I don't know that we need that much of a presentation there. Any questions from counselors?
Motion to approve.
First by Counselor Melton. Second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of a resolution regarding funding encumbrances. This is resolution 2023-02, and we have Cindy here to present. Director of Finance, Cindy Poor. I guess I should properly address you.
Yeah, this is something that we go through towards the end of every year. What happens is we have contracts that have been signed or commitments of dollars that due to either timing or projects not finishing, they're not billed in the budget year that they were budgeted for. And so this allows us to carry those dollars forward without dipping into the next year's budget to finish off these items. So that's what this list is.
Any questions from counselors?
I just have one brief question on the last item on the page. It's the McKenna form-based code, and this one says addendum. And I was just curious, so that's beyond our contract with them, is that correct?
Mike Dale, Community and Economic Development. That's correct, Counselor. There have been a few more things that staff has asked the consultant to include in additional work beyond the original scope that would total about $9,600. So staff has asked McKenna Associates to increase their scope for a few additional tasks that we believe would make the document more usable, more user-friendly. For example, we're asking McKenna to include some guidelines for a user user guidelines. Since it's a new type of code, a form-based code, rather than standard code, we thought it'd be a helpful tool. And there's some other elements, for example, a few more illustrations for building types that were not part of the original scope. So there's several other things, and I can come back and report to you more thoroughly if you'd like to know, but that's the reason for the addendum.
If you don't mind.
No, please.
So the two things that you both just said kind of conflict each other. Cindy said that it's for things that were budgeted for last year, but not spent yet. And from what I'm understanding, you're saying this is for additional that wasn't planned for. Which one is it?
It is the latter.
All right, so this should be an additional appropriation then, not.
It's still, no, there were budgeted funds for this.
All right. I'm confused.
I guess question for our attorney. On these, can we pull items until we get clarification? Is that something that we could do? Because honestly, Mike, I'd be interested in kind of understanding what all this is really going to entail, what all you've requested. And you said you'd report back, but you'll report back after we've already paid. So I'd rather have the report and then we pay.
I can, if you will, before tonight's meeting is over, I can go upstairs and find that information and present it tonight.
I'd feel better about it, but I also think there's a little bit of a process issue is what it sounds like.
Okay. So let me, and maybe I'm hearing something different than they're hearing. So this money was budgeted last year. We just didn't spend $9,600 of what was budgeted last year, which is why we're spending it this year.
I'm sorry, but that budget was for consultant services. So there was ample money in a category called consultant services.
Okay.
Okay. But again, it was in the 2022 budget for $9,600 more than what was spent. And we're just spending that in 2023.
Not specifically for $9,600. There was a lot of money remaining in that line item.
But you're asking for $9,600.
Correct.
All right. I understand that now.
That makes a little more sense.
That makes a lot more sense. Okay.
I guess if you'd like to send that to me via email, that'd make me feel better. I think these guys have their questions answered already.
Okay. Would you like that this evening or?
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Just stay here for the meeting. Yeah. I think it's important.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions for Cindy?
I don't have a question, but President Plunkett alluded to this, Cindy, but just to publicly congratulate you on your new appointment to the position of Director of Finance.
Thank you.
And congratulations, well deserved, and thank you for all you've done in the last year.
Thank you.
Carried a lot of
Appreciate
load.
that.
Thank you.
I will make a motion. If there are no other comments from councilors, I'll make a motion to approve resolution 2023-02. Second by Councilor Trailer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you, Cindy. Don't go far. I think you're next. Up next is a consideration of a resolution regarding opt-in to the Meyer opioid litigation settlement. This is resolution 2023-03.
Yes. The resolution before you, number 2023-03, is to opt into the Meyer opioid settlement. The town, along with many other municipalities, is represented by a national consortium of law firms in connection with various pieces of the opioid litigation. Tonight's resolution relates to the piece of litigation involving defendant Meyer Incorporated and a proposed regional settlement with that defendant. Representatives from the national consortium state as follows. We are happy to bring this proposed Meyer settlement to you as a regional proposal. This means it is not part of the national deals and will be paid directly to you now. There's no payout over time. The reason for this approach is due to the minimal market share Meyer has nationwide. The settling Meyer stores account for approximately 0.1% of the national opioid distribution. Your national council recommends participating in this Meyer settlement.
So I think, just briefly, I'm not an expert on this, but I did, ask a few questions. I would just say that from this particular perspective, you guys will recall, we had a couple of actions over the last couple of years about opting in and opting out. Those were specific to what the Attorney General was doing in the state of Indiana. This is a scenario where if we opt in, we participate in that settlement. If we opt out, we have to do, and Cindy, if I'm out of scope here, please let me know. But if we opt out, then in order for us to request anything, we have to go in and justify the need, the impact, et cetera, et cetera. We would have to do that on our own.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So
And my guess for the council is you're going to start to see a number of these start to come forward because the defendant firms are starting to settle. So it's all the major retailers of any sort of opioid products that were found, as part of this national class action settlements.
Is there a blanket umbrella kind of suit against all the distributors?
There are a number of different suits around the country by different litigants. So for example, previously we opted out of the settlement for the state of Indiana. They were settling just on behalf of the state and we were going to distribute the proceeds. So each one is a little bit different, but yes, so this national consortium of law firms is a consolidated litigation against many defendant pharmacies. So that's why I said I think you'll start to see some of these. They're doing regional settlements and national settlements,
But this will all come to us piecemeal. There's
yes,
no
right.
overarching.
Yeah, you'll start to see them as each defendant is still bifurcated, I think, in the lawsuits. I don't think they've rolled up into any joint liability.
Yeah, that's the same question I had, Heather. Are we going to now begin to see these as individual, like dozens of these are going to start coming in
Yeah.
individually? So there's not going to be a package
Yes.
joint?
I don't expect that to be the case, as I understand the litigation, how it's rolling out nationally. They're like this, if you look at this, like this is even a regional settlement for Meyer, so I don't know that they've settled nationally. But this is a settlement that's Indiana, Kentucky, I think Ohio, and for Michigan, Illinois, and Ohio. So this settlement is only pertains to the municipal defendants in the
Yeah.
municipal plaintiffs in those.
And that may be the only states where they have a footprint, I believe, Meyer.
Yeah, they may have other cases, but because it's a regional settlement, there's like all different kinds of plaintiffs against many of these defendant parties.
Cindy, do we have any estimated dollar amount on what we can expect for any of these, or?
Well, for this one, after attorney's fees comes out, approximately 37,500.
Thank you.
and then we'll have to, I believe, probably at the next meeting, we'll have to open up an account for this and, right? I mean, that's
correct. Yeah.
yeah. So I do think it's important, counselors, as you see the litigation stuff come through, obviously, as we've known in the past, Heather's firm represents some parts of this, right? So
Lots of,
she's,
lots of defendants.
so a lot of our questions need to be directed to the group that's settling this nationally.
Yes.
So
yeah.
questions that we have, if you want to funnel them through me, you can do that, but you've got the email. I forwarded the email to you that has their direct contact info as well, and I'll continue to do that as we get these settlements.
Yeah, and Amy Nooning is serving as the primary point of contact, and I can definitely advise you on procedures and where to deposit funds or any of those kinds of things. But
There is no stipulation on what these funds can be utilized for. It's just a general
Yeah,
fund.
with this, I'm not
don't believe so.
sure. I
Yeah, I
haven't
don't
seen
think
the guidelines yet.
Okay.
I think they just go into a separate fund for receipts purposes for the State Board of Accounts, and then you can spend them for any government purpose.
Any other questions from counselors? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
First by Counselor Traylor, second by Counselor Choi. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Cindy.
Thank you, Cindy.
Up next on the agenda is a consideration of an ordinance amending the Town of Zionsville zoning ordinance. This is the Creekside PUD. This is ordinance 2023-01. We have Roger Kilmer and Corey Sharp to present.
Evening, councilors. Roger Kilmer, senior planner for the town. Here to introduce a requested rezoning that would affect 3 lots within the Creekside Corporate Park PUD. The Plan Commission at its January 17th, 2023 meeting heard docket 2022-60-Z and arrived at a favorable recommendation of this requested rezoning unanimously, and they forwarded the certification of that action to you, and it was included in your packet. It was dated January 18th, I believe. The rezoning, if you're not familiar with Creekside, is a PUD which has divided the number of lots, I believe a total of 14 lots, into 4 different sub areas. The request before you is to create a 5th sub area, taking 2 of the lots out of sub area D and creating a new sub area E. These 2 lots would be utilized by the Graham Rahal Performance Development. That project has submitted a replatting and development plan petitions, which will be heard by the Plan Commission later this month. The rezoning is, again, will affect those 2 lots. There is a 3rd lot which would be affected, not associated with the Graham Rahal project, but it is simply to clean up sub area B, which consists of this 1 lot, includes a permitted use of childcare centers, which is not permitted on that lot. So we're removing that. So those are the 3 lots that are involved with this rezoning. Sub area B, the removal of the of the child care center, and then the 2 lots for the Graham Rahal project. In a summary memo that was provided to you, I listed the permitted uses, which would be included in this new sub area E. And that is what I have to present at this time. I'll turn it over to Corey Sharp. She might have something to add.
Honestly, Mr. Kilmer did a great job. I just have one minor addition to his comments. As we were reviewing the PUD that you have before you with the developer, and we have one Scribner's error. And I just want to point it out. It doesn't require your action, but it will change how it reads. So in the new sub area, there are 2 sections that identify permitted uses. It's under 1.8. And the first section says permitted uses for owner occupied lots. And then underneath 1.8B.2, we refer to, it says single tenant building uses listed above. And so what it's supposed to say is all of the above uses in sub area E are also allowed in multiple tenant buildings. But instead it says single tenant building uses listed above. So we're just cleaning up that language to make the correct reference. Mr. Kilmer or I would be happy to take any of your questions.
Just on the that lot 9, it's just removing childcare.
Just removing childcare, and we opted to do that because we were getting inquiries about childcare facilities and the way our IDEM approvals are and agreements. Childcare is not allowed in Creekside because of previous contamination.
Ah, okay, that explains. I get it now.
Mhm.
So silly question then. If it was not allowed because of previous contamination, what's different now?
It's,
The contamination been resolved?
yes, the contamination has been cleaned up,
Okay.
but there is a legacy of environmental issues that continue on after a cleanup. And part of that legacy is no childcare, no residential living, no senior care, things like that, just to continue to be safe. Mhm.
Corey, I just had a question in that same section right above. So 1.8, section B, number 2, to your point, single tenant building uses listed above. In 1.8 B1, it says sub area B uses. Is that,
Yes.
what's the, I'm just wondering why sub area B uses is included in the sub area E explanation.
Because they are encompassing, so sub area B is the RLL project. So basically, we're saying the uses on the RLL site are compatible with the Graham
I thought
Rahal
E.
uses.
E is the RL, or the D is the RLL site, E is the GRP
I'm
site.
sorry.
My question is in the section that discusses E, why is it referencing subsection B?
Oh, because there are some uses in sub area B that are more retail oriented. So sub area B for single or multiple tenant buildings allows for a microbrewery and a gift shop, a wine shop, a recreation center. And these are some of the things that the Graham Rahal Performance organization is wanting to utilize in their project. So we're saying, yes, you can use these uses are allowed on this site.
So instead of listing them in E, you're just referencing that they're in B already, so you
Right.
don't need to duplicate.
Exactly.
So I guess last piece on this, maybe, I just want to make sure there's a, in the section right above that in section A, listed for sub area E, there is an event center, correct? And I understand the intent and the purpose for that, right? Because of all the stuff that's going to go on. I just want to make sure that for the section below permitted uses in section B, that it says sub area B uses, that does not include the event center that's listed in section A.
Section A. Oh, it would include that. The primary difference between section A and this section is that it's an owner occupied building versus a multiple use, multiple tenant building. So if the owner occupied building, they are going to have event activities, it would be allowed then underneath a multiple tenant structure.
Just to make a comment on that, President Plunkett, it looks like the size of B is not very large in its size. So if we're talking about an event center, you'll have parking, building. So the event center would be very limited in its use, even if it was an outlet style building.
Yeah, maybe I'm not, so section B, sub area B is in boy, allows for 27 permitted uses. And there's nothing in subsection or sub area B that says event center. Okay?
That's correct.
Yeah, so then I just want to make sure going down here to 1.8 in section E, that where it says under permitted uses for multiple tenant building, the number 1 line says sub area B uses. And then underneath it, it says single tenant building uses. If you're saying listed all above, I just want to make sure that this is not saying now that B can have an event center on there.
Correct.
Okay. So-
That's correct.
So that this does not do that.
No, it does
Okay.
not.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for counselors? No, we're clear as mud. I would make a motion to approve ordinance 2023-01.
Second.
The second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. All right, moving along. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance amending the traffic code of the Zionsville or town of Zionsville. This is for the First Street. This is ordinance 2023-02. This is a first reading, and since Lance is not here tonight, I will actually introduce this or talk about this. Let me pull this up. We had, many of you counselors will recall, a few years ago, we had folks talking about, well, let me make sure I got the right one. Okay, this is going to be First Street. So we had introduced a few years ago a modification to the parking ordinance that would restrict both the north and south side of First Street and put in a loading zone in the morning for the hours of, I think it was like 6 to 10, right? The purpose of that, and I was one that worked on that ordinance. The purpose of that was we had multiple restaurants. We had multiple groups that were using those areas as loading and unloading zone. I think what we have is, and over the years, we've even heard there's a law firm down there that's requested that be removed. But the restaurants were still kind of using that area. One of those restaurants that was using it quite a bit actually is no longer there. One of the other restaurants that uses it gets most of their deliveries in the non-morning hours because they're serving breakfast. So the idea here is from First Street north of Oak Street, we would remove the loading and unloading zone restriction. The south of Oak Street would remain in force. Okay. So as many of you know, there's a new restaurant there that, you know, has morning operations. And in an effort to kind of get a good feel for what this might look like, I've been there 3 or 4 times and just kind of sat there for an hour and a half or so and had a good cup of coffee and some conversation and noticed the entire street is packed for that entire loading zone in that same time frame. So I think this does 2 things. Number one, it frees up the enforcement, right? Because the ordinance are only as good as they can be enforced. And I don't know that we necessarily want police officers down there, you know, ticketing people at that time in the morning that are just in there for a cup of coffee anyway. So this is not something that was brought to me to change by any particular petitioner. It was just a function of Lance and I having multiple conversations about it, sitting down there and, you know, talking to folks about, you know, what they'd like to see. So again, this is a first reading. We can certainly amend this or make changes, and Lance would be here likely at the next meeting to be able to answer any other questions beyond that. So any questions from you guys?
I mean, I think it's a change that adjusts to the business that's there currently, right?
Yeah.
2 years ago was a completely different situation. South of Oak, there is no parking on First anyway, right? So I
That's
mean,
right.
is it even need to be spelled out?
Yes.
Well, there's parking there. So there's parking
little-
option. It's all loading zone for until I think 4 o'clock.
Okay.
So,
It was a big problem.
yeah.
And
Before.
yeah. And it's not perfect now, but it's
Right. Heather, is there anything you want to add to that?
Nope.
Motion to introduce on first reading.
I got a first by Counselor Choi,
Second.
second by Vice President Burke. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is consideration of an ordinance amending the traffic code for the town of Zionsville. This is specific to Colony Woods. This is ordinance 2023-03. Again, similar to many of you might remember, we modified the parking options across from the high school due to drop off and pickup. This does the same thing, only it does it on the west side of Colony Woods next to the grade school. So as to eliminate, we've had different folks come to us talking about, people trying to avoid drop off line, parking there, their kids running across the street. Obviously, that creates a little bit of a traffic hazard. In addition, we did reach out to the Colony Woods POA, and they are supportive of this. So again, this is also on first reading, and we would hopefully have Lance here for the next one if there are any other questions. But I'm obviously happy to answer them if there are questions from counselors.
I mean, to your question earlier about just enforcement, I mean, are these gonna be enforced? Is it enforced now over by high school?
Yeah, I think it's enforced pretty good over at the high school. Part of it, I think, is because we've got some SROs there too, right? I mean, it's enforced pretty well. So.
Make a motion to introduce on first reading.
Got a first from Counselor Trailer,
Second.
second from Counselor Choi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion, all those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance amending the traffic code for the town of Zionsville. This is the golf cart ordinance amendment. This is ordinance 2023-04. This is also a first reading. And in an effort not to continue down the same path of me introducing these, I would love for Heather to talk about this one.
Sure. So for those of you that served on the council, when we put in place the original golf cart ordinance, one of the things we wanted to monitor over that period of time with some of the street restrictions is whether or not there were traffic violations or concerns with golf carts on some of the busier roads. So as you may recall, there was sort of a Swiss cheese effect of how you could get from point A to point B using a golf cart. And some of the residents were unable to really access the village or go certain places in the town because you could go here, but then you couldn't go here. And yet if you were in the unincorporated county, you could go anywhere. So it was very confusing. But at the time, we were trying to balance the interest in having, golf carts on residential streets with making sure that people were safely driving them, that we weren't experiencing other traffic concerns. So we put in place the original ordinance. I think what we've seen over time and talking, I know Councilor Plunkett has had an opportunity to talk with Chief Spears, is we really haven't seen a lot of issues. People are complying with the rules and regulations. They're coming in. We also did a look when we were putting together this amendment at all of our surrounding communities. So we looked at Westfield and Whitestown and Carmel and Fishers just to get a sense of what they were doing and how we aligned. So a couple of changes that you're seeing is one is lowering the fee. We wanted to bring it into alignment with other communities to really reduce the fee to $50 from $100 as it exists today. The other thing is we wanted to do a 2-year permit so that it's less of a burden on the residents, but also less of a burden on our police department having to deal with paperwork when we have folks complying. Doesn't change any of the enforcement requirements. So all the safety, mechanisms that you have to have in place, working lights, a horn, any of those safety mechanisms are still required, but it does basically eliminate all the street restrictions. The other thing we wanted to make sure is that if people were crossing a major street, that they were doing it at an intersection and in accordance with regular traffic laws. So we did spell that out a little bit more clearly. We don't want people cutting across, Oak Street when it's busy during rush hour, where people aren't maybe paying attention, that they're there. So this is what this is really accomplishing. You'll see It's amending. One of the things we're trying to do is just kind of change the format a little bit of how we're approaching our code and our ordinances when we're putting them forward. So this is amending the current section of code. So you don't see the whole ordinance. You should assume that everything else is still there. But if you go into the code, you'll see our full golf cart ordinance. So this is only amending the approved areas of operation, and then also the registration fee, and then all of the other remaining provisions remain the same.
So if I'm reading this right, so that means other than Oak Street and Sycamore between First and 116th, or I guess that is 116th, you can drive anywhere now?
Yeah, so the exceptions are Oak Street, Sycamore Street, from First Street to Michigan, 116th, 106th Street, and 96th Street, but you can cross any of those roads at a intersection in accordance with regular traffic law. Does that sound good, Councilor?
That sounds great.
I mean, I think it's important, you know, for counselors and public to know. I mean, what I heard with this ordinance ever since we worked to put it in. So when we first started this, we had questions about enforcement. How easily is this to enforce? We had 18 different restrictions on riding a golf cart. And some of them were literally a 100-yard stretch of road, right? And I think at some point, you know, you get into a scenario where we have to, people who are operating golf carts, no different than when you're in a golf cart community, whether you're doing it on the streets or anywhere else, you have to assume responsibility. It's got to be, you know, up to code. You got to have insurance. I mean, you got to be responsible with it, right? And what I was hearing from people was, I can't get to downtown from my neighborhood unless I get on this trail, cross this driveway, and you end up having people jumping out onto roads that they're allowed to drive, but no one's expecting to see them coming out in those areas. So this is really an effort to kind of just clean that up and make it easier for the police department to enforce, allow for additional connectivity. I do think that, so again, this is a first reading. So I want to make sure, you know, Pat, I appreciate what you were saying up here, and I'm not opposed to that. Okay. Just so everyone knows, when we first put this in, the reason we left trails off was because the parks director at that time, and I think Lance even talked about, you know, getting emergency equipment on a trail. Like, that was primarily for the rail trail though, right? So it was a lot about, you know, we've got people trying to share the road with a bicycle and a golf cart, and there's a problem there. How do we get an ambulance down the trail to take care of these people? So what I would like, and we can certainly continue to communicate about this, assuming this council is open to moving this along, I would like to have additional dialogue over the next week with both Jared, I see Jared back there, with Jared and with Lance, and likely Chief Spears and Chief Van Gorder, about logistically, if something happens, can we get emergency equipment down there? Are these trails equipped to handle, you know, golf carts, et cetera, et cetera? So.
Yeah, and I was just going to note for Mr. Cross, and I want to research this a little bit more, but my memory also is, in addition to some of the widths of the trail, like, we wanted to make sure some of our trails are not very wide, and some of the travelers on those trails are running with headphones, and we want to make sure, you know, it's different than a two-way street when you should be engaged in watching the traffic coming both ways, should be being the key term. But with the paths, there's a different, you know, expectation when you go running on a path, right, or on a trail. The other thing is, we need to look at, and I don't know the answer to it, I just can't remember, it's been a few years. There also was an issue with motorized scooters. So the state of Indiana passed a statute that basically said, if you allow for any motorized, like, vehicles on
e-bikes, electric bicycles,
e-bikes, scooters. Yeah. And so we had an issue with that once before, because if you allow certain vehicles on, you have to, there's a statute that basically says you have to allow all of them on. And so there is some issues there. We have an e-bike, you know, provision, which basically says you still can't go above an expected, you know, speed limit of what a biker someone on pedaling would be able to do. But I do want to look at that because my memory is serving me that there was something related to that issue that created some restrictions. I did look in preparation for this conversation, knowing that was something coming up in the community. There are communities that are allowing these kind of specific crossings without going down a trail, similar to what we're doing with like Oak Street or others. So there may be some middle ground with what some of the constituents are interested in. But I think we will want to research that too and just make sure we've covered all of those bases.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm looking at Turkey Foot Road, I mean, if you're telling me if this passes, you can go down Willow, why would I need to go down that cart path to get to Holiday Farms?
I think there's that bridge, if I'm not, that's there, am I right? Okay.
Well, I think,
I remember
Well,
a bridge
no,
situation.
There is a bridge and there's
Yeah.
pylons, so you can't
But I
go
think-
through there, but if you can drive on Willow, and I mean, the only neighborhood that really impacts is Oak Ridge.
I think
Yeah.
the thought is convenience of instead of having to go all the
Yeah, but
way.
that's-
Yeah, from-
That's one neighborhood though.
from a convenience perspective, and in full disclosure, Oak Ridge is in my current district. So, I mean, that's where I'm hearing a lot of this stuff, right?
Okay.
And I think,
I was just saying.
Yeah.
you know, when we first started looking at this, I was under the impression that when we first, Heather started working on the initial ordinance, I was under the impression that even Holiday Farms was going to have that south entrance. And it looks like that's starting to be finalized there, right? So I mean, that's starting to come along. So part of it was, how do we, and you'll recall Willow Road was a restricted road, right? So how do we get folks, you know, up there, down here into the village to, you know, shop, eat, et cetera, on their golf carts if they want to. And also by lifting that Willow Road restriction, it does allow for that southern entrance. I don't think you'll ever, I don't ever want, obviously it's a state road, so Michigan road's obviously always going to be off the table, right? So I'm sensitive to the fact that we're going to try to find different ways into Holiday Farms if we want to have golf carts, you know, accessible. So I would say, you know, Mr. Cross, I would say that, again, if you give us, depending on the outcome of this vote, you give us a week to work with Jared and Lance and Heather, do a little bit more research, and maybe we can come up with something that's a little bit more amenable to what you want.
I would also worry that there's two spots that are going east and west that are part of the golf course now. If someone's hauling down going north on that thing, you'd have no idea. You get T-boned in like 2 seconds.
On the trail.
You know, if you're on the golf course, just trying to get from one hole to the other, and someone's hauling down 25 miles per hour on one of these things, you wouldn't be able to see them.
Yeah.
I have a couple talking points on that too. So we went from $100 per year to $50 for 2 years. Is that correct?
That's
So-
the proposal, yes.
So that's the proposal. So I guess, is the police department responsible for any inspections or anything on these, or what's that $50 do? Just curiously, is it administrative, just so we file and we've got this on file?
Yeah. So
Okay. Is there a check the box? Do
That's
you
all
have-
it is.
Do you have license, turn signals, headlights? Is that on the
So-
checklist?
So they have to do an attestation that, you know, these things exist. One of the things we don't want to do is put the police department or the town in the position of saying whether or not someone's golf cart is in a safe condition. That's really the owner's responsibility to
Okay.
do that. Our uniformed police officers, you know, but I think that was the original thought, is we're not going to put them in the position of saying, do your tail lights work every single time?
But they would enforce if
But
they
would
noticed,
enforce
if they
the
noticed
tail
it
light was
wasn't.
out. Correct.
Okay, I
exactly.
just want to make sure that our $100 a year going down to 50 for 2 maybe shouldn't be 50 per year. So stay at 100 for 2 years, but
Yeah.
we'll talk through that. You did some research on that and.
Yeah, it
Well,
also is aligning to Whitestown, I think, which is
Sure.
50. So for folks that are just right there on the edge and maybe have both, it just seemed to make some sense to.
It was also an arbitrary number.
Okay,
I mean,
well,
the full-
great. And
in
it would
full
be,
disclosure, it was an arbitrary number when we put.
it's arbitrary to me if they're not doing an inspection, if
Yeah.
they're not being pulled from police duties or whatever.
Yeah.
The other thing in the rural district, just pointing out, and Jared might be able to talk on this, and Lance eventually, with when, you know, the path construction matters. You know, I'm under the idea that our city paths, our town paths are built, you know, to a standard. I know that a healthy standard. I know that maybe in some of the rural communities like Royal Run may not be able to sustain, you know, a golf cart on it for daily use. So it was designed for, walking path bicycles. So just pointing that out. And then, clarity on the right of way, I think might be important. But I think Heather's saying we don't want to tell people how to react, but knowing who has the right of way when a golf carts come in versus, that biker, I think is important. I know when I was on the Monon Trail, you're getting ready to pass somebody that's walking, you say, passing on your left, there's a whole process to try and make that safe. With a 4-foot golf cart, it's, it could be cumbersome. So just things that we should probably think about moving forward as well.
I've got a few questions. President Plunkett, and you won't know this, but maybe you do because you're constantly researching things that surprises me. Do we know the current number of permits of golf carts in Zionsville?
I don't.
Is there a minimum horsepower, for lack of a better term, either, electric?
No.
Generally, I mean, so, I do have some concern. I've been in different golf carts and some can actually do 40 miles an hour and some can do 10. So I think there's some, I mean, you can still put lights on and everything else, but I just didn't know if that's something we should consider, that you can actually get up to speed in some of these places. I'm thinking like Ford Road seems like so what I was thinking was, where are the places that would correlate between a higher MPH? Right. And so I couldn't think of many, but like, is there some way to think about if there's a minimum miles per hour on that road for an automobile and it's say 45 miles an hour or something else, maybe we don't want a golf cart on that. There's just maybe a way to look at it as far as like maybe Ford or any other road that may have an MPH. And that may be the only one. I'm sure you thought about Ford, but
Yeah, I mean, I think the only one that really, as we started looking through this, the one that really stood out to me was the Sycamore Road from Main Street to Michigan Road, right? I mean, because that's one that's got a lower speed limit. But as we've heard multiple times with residents wanting us to listen to lowering the speed limit there, or maybe even warranting an increase, right? So that was one that we kind of wanted to make sure we avoided. When you start thinking about, the Ford Road, I mean, the connectivity of folks on Ford Road to even get from their neighborhood to, to Sycamore there and come in the backside of town, that doesn't exist either. Or Starkey, not Sycamore. That doesn't exist either. So you got people that are landlocked in their different neighborhoods because of the restrictions on that road. Zionsville Road's another one. I struggle with that one a little bit, and the number of phone calls or communication that I had with folks in Hoosier Village about, being able to go from Hoosier Village into town. I mean, it's a big deal there, right? So I think no matter what you do, it's going to be tough, right? Because it's something that
yeah, I'm just trying to balance, accessibility, which people want to have, with public safety.
Sure.
Some of these just don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I was just going to point out, so we do have golf cart defined in the same way it's defined in Indiana statute, which says, it has to be outfitted for the purpose of carrying golf clubs. And so there is some expectation in terms of design, like what we're talking about. And then the other thing I was going to note, I think maybe Counselor Trailer brought it up, or Counselor Melton, I apologize, but somebody had asked about, going across a fairway or something with the golf course. So we specifically exempt out private property and golf courses from our ordinance. So the rules of like a private, development, private land or private golf course, those would be whatever the rules are for that piece of property, for that property owner. Doesn't mean you can't drive them if that property allows for it. Just means that their rules would trump in this instance.
Heather, I had one other legal question, kind of just to address the thought of using them on a trail, which initially I didn't think was probably a very good idea, but I could see where there could be some exceptions. Is there a way for us in this ordinance to allow it within certain parameters of a trail and restrict it to others? Are we allowed to do that, or is it kind of a blanket regulation on trails?
No, I think you could restrict it the same way you restrict the streets today. So in the current ordinance, we restrict certain streets. Even in this proposed amendment, we still restrict use on certain busy streets, you know, that we know are.
Right, right.
busy.
I just didn't know if there was, like you said, like
Yeah, I
state
think the-
statute, because you'd mentioned,
Yeah, I think that's
Motorized.
the one question caveat. And I've seen other communities do that, right? Where they're saying you can, like City of Bloomington, I looked at earlier today, it says you can do it on this trail and this trail, but you can't do it on the B line. You can't do it on, you know, the rail side trail. But I think the question I just need to clarify in my own memory is this whole issue of, and Jared was nodding at me, so I know it's maybe an issue we gotta look at, is the scooters and e-bikes and like, what do we open up when we allow a motorized vehicle on a trail? Because it does trigger some of these other statutes, and that's just something I need to get some more clarity. I remember it, but not enough to tell you the details.
I would just say my one concern on trails, as all of us have probably had children out there, particularly young kids, learning to ride bikes. My son was almost killed on a small bike, hit by a large bike, just because he didn't know what he was doing. And, you know, I just see a lot of that. I'm on the trails all the time. There's a trail right behind my house. I would just be concerned in many places where there's a lot of young people, a lot of kids learning how to ride bicycles and not knowing how to react to a golf cart coming in at 20, 25 miles an hour. So that's just something that's in my head initially, why I would balk at this on a trail, but doesn't mean I can't, you know, listen to reason and change my mind.
Just a point of clarity, because I don't want to confuse the public. The ordinance in front of us has nothing to do with trails.
Exactly.
Despite all this conversation, has nothing to do with trails. So when I vote to approve this ordinance, it has nothing to do with putting golf carts on trails, because I'm probably a hard pass on that. So.
No, you're exactly right. I'm just
cleared up.
It's been addressed as maybe something we would amend later. So I just want to ask a question.
You're right.
You're 100% correct. Yes.
Any other questions from counselors? I will make a motion to introduce ordinance 2023-04 on first reading.
Second.
Was that Counselor Trailer?
Yes.
Second by Counselor Trailer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Up next is a consideration of an ordinance establishing the position of Director and Deputy Director of Finance and Records and reestablishing the position of Municipal Relations Coordinator of the Town of Zionsville. This is ordinance 2023-05. This is also a first reading, and we are also going to have Heather introduce this.
Okay, so I'm going to try to be quick but thorough, but I can definitely answer any questions you might have. So in our December meeting, I believe, Counselor Trailer, you brought up the question of whether or not we could eliminate the Chief Financial Officer position from the salary ordinance. And that prompted the discussion of the need to create then and reestablish the position of the Director of the Department of Finance and Records. As we researched this, we knew there would be 2 positions within the Department of Finance and Records, similar to how we had a chief financial officer for the town and a deputy chief financial officer. So this is going back and reestablishing what we had in place prior to the creation of the chief financial officer position in 2020. When we created the position of Chief Financial Officer, eliminating the position of the Director of Department and Finance and Records, there was a new position created, which was the Municipal Relations Coordinator. So this is not an attempt to change any of the duties of that position of Municipal Relations Coordinator, but they're all pretty intimately intertwined because of our reorganization. So just to give you the big picture, when we went through the reorganization of the town in 2014 through resolution 2014-11, the Government Modernization Act, which gave the town the authority to go through that reorganization, says that when you reorganize a unit, or when you're reorganizing more than one unit, you can eliminate elected positions, but you cannot create more positions. The premise is that this is designed to create efficiencies in government, not grow government. And so what happened at the time is the town chose to create the position of mayor, but because we couldn't add a new position, we eliminated the position of clerk treasurer, which previously was an elected position in the town. The duties of the clerk treasurer, because we are still a town, still remain. So all of the statutory obligations of a clerk treasurer are still vested in the responsibility of the town. But our reorg transferred those duties to the mayor, and then in the reorganization stated that the mayor shall transfer those to the Department of Finance and Records, and then to the Director of Finance and Records as the department head of that department. So when that happened, and then when we created the CFO position, some of the duties of the clerk treasurer went with the CFO position, and that position asked the director of that department, the department head still retained sort of the oversight authority for all of those clerk treasurer duties. But part of the position duties were assigned to this new position of municipal relations coordinator. And specifically, those were the duties of a clerk treasurer that are to be the clerk of the town council, managing the town council's agenda, doing the public notices, putting, the postings in the newspaper, filing the ordinances with the county clerk. All of those types of responsibilities are now vested in that municipal relations coordinator position. So since we're now eliminating the chief financial officer position, you have to kind of keep all three of these stated at the same time, because you've got to go back and separate how the clerk treasurer duties are going to be divided among those different positions within the town to kind of relate it back to our reorganization requirements and then the statutory requirements of clerk treasurer. So I know that's clear as mud. I tried to explain it as clear as I could, but because of that, we've created all three positions. The other thing we're trying to do, as you recall, is we're trying to go in and use this year, as we've talked about during the last budget cycle, to modernize the entire code of ordinances. And so one of the goals as part of that modernization is to get these department head positions clearly articulated so that anyone in the town can go in and say, okay, what are the departments of the town? And then what are the duties that these directors have within those departments? So the duties that are listed for the director and the deputy director are just parroting what you already approved for the job descriptions that Joe Keel presented a couple of weeks ago. So really, it's just the same duties. And then it's taking into the director position at the Department of Finance and Records, those financial clerk responsibilities, and then it's moving the administrative town council clerk responsibilities to the municipal relations coordinator. Make sense? So it seems more complicated, but it's kind of following to make sure all of these duties are covered, that we're doing all of our statutory duties, as clerk treasurer, are still being performed by someone, and that it's clear and public and transparent.
Are there any questions from counselors for Heather? Heather, can you speak to just briefly the reporting of each one of these particular positions? Yes. Obviously, one of the things we've talked about in the past is just department heads and various authorities and such. Could you just speak to each one of these briefly?
Absolutely. And this is on first reading. So obviously, there may be feedback or changes that we, that individuals want to make prior to final reading. So the current position of the Director of Department of Finance and Records is a department head. So we specified that clearly. That was already included in the job description. Joe Keel confirmed that in her comments. That position reports to the mayor and the deputy mayor within the town. Technically the mayor, but then the mayor can also delegate, which is the deputy mayor. The deputy director position reports to the director of the Department of Finance and Records, but ultimately is subject to oversight by the mayor and the deputy mayor as well. And then the municipal relations coordinator position currently reports to the mayor and the deputy mayor, but it also has responsibilities to the town council president, because you're serving as the clerk of the town council. And so if you go into the clerk responsibilities, you're taking direction from the town council in terms of setting the agenda, when do you post the meetings, when are the meetings going to be held. So one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that there was coordination of that position, both in terms of if, for example, someone were to come in and or God forbid, Amy would leave, and we would have a vacant position, we still need to have some role. The mayor would still appoint that position because that's a mayoral appointment, in her role under the reorg. But we want to make sure there's coordination of, that position being filled so that the statutory duties of the council can continue. So then the goal also is, because you have this sort of dual almost reporting structure where you've got duties to two different groups, part of your time going to one person, part of your time going to the council. The other thing we included was some formalizing of having the town council president share with the HR director of the town, any performance issues, any good, bad, indifferent, making sure that there was a formal communication structure for performance reviews, since part of the duties would be for the town council. Just so that we have good communications going both ways and make sure that, the person, whoever's serving in that role, the whole, job is being represented in their performance reviews.
Thank you.
Yep.
I also think, counselors, we're going to see a lot of this, right? I mean, part of what we included in last year's budget was just the opportunity to rewrite ordinances and clean things up. I mean, there's a lot of ordinances in this town that just need to be modernized and use the language that we have with our current structure of government. So Heather's going to be introducing a lot of these, I would imagine, in the coming future, just so we, again, clean everything up and just make it all make sense.
My understanding on the MAC or clerk position, again, so that's not a head of a department, because there's no department, there's no funding, there's nothing there. So not a head of a department.
Correct. That's
Okay.
correct. Yes.
And the goal is to have the town council president have some say in the performance and employment of that particular person.
Yeah. So it would still be selected by the mayor, just like any department head. Under the reorganization, then whoever is serving as the mayor has the ability to appoint those positions. And then it's creating a reporting structure so that the town council president for the clerk duties, if you go back, and it's clear as mud, but if you go back into the clerk treasurer role, that was a role that the council had some oversight of whoever serves as the clerk of the council. So it's trying to encompass that in some sort of formal way, and also making sure for the duties of that person that we're formalizing, and sharing back with the HR director, this person's doing a great job, or this is an area of,
You're saying go back in the reorg.
Go back into the staff so the reorg doesn't have this position, but we established this position with the 2020 salary ordinance.
With the salary ordinance. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I tried to parrot that language, but then add in some sort of coordination between the parties to make sure that they're collaborating on performance reviews and any sort of dismissal or suspension of that position, because that directly would impact the town council if you don't have somebody in that position to do the clerk duties.
Heather, just to clarify, you said that obviously the mayor gets to appoint heads, but this is not a head.
Correct. That's correct.
So you kind of assumed that the mayor could appoint this position. Why would she appoint this position, or the mayor appoint this position if it were not a department head? Why would not the supervising manager be the hiring supervisor?
I think the way I have it drafted, which you could always change, the way I have drafted it is just to literally take the way it was appointed in the 2020 salary ordinance and just relate it here, because it's got part of the clerk duties that are still required under the reorganization. So that was my whole thinking in terms of adding this position into these other two, was just for our code. So you can say, if someone looked at it and said, wait, you're supposed to be the clerk treasurer and do all of the statutory obligations of a clerk treasurer, where are duties A, B, and C, so like the director of the Department of Finance and Records, for example, in the clerk's duties, like in Cindy's position, she's going to have the responsibility for doing the budgeting and making sure that the claims are completed, doing the reporting to the State Board of Accounts, doing the, tax forms for the Department of Local Government Finance. Those are all in the list of clerk treasurer duties. And then there's duties related to being the clerk of the town council, which has been shifted into this position. So it's really just trying to make sure that if you were somebody walking in and you read our code of ordinance, you'd say, haha, they're still doing everything that's required of a clerk, but this person does this and this person does that.
No, that makes sense to me. It's just more of, this used to be an elected position. And so now it'd be an appointed position, even though you're asking the council president to have some say in that, but not necessarily hiring authority.
Right. And some communities have it, it's under the council budget and then the position solely reports, but this position is serving.
It's like a hybrid.
Yeah. Amy gets two jobs for the price of one. She's serving as the clerk of the council, and then she's also doing the municipal relations activities for the MAC.
Right.
So needs to have, sort of serves two masters, if you will. But it's just, in terms of the job description, it's the same as the 2020 ordinance. The only thing I would say is in the 2020 ordinance, and Counselor Garrett isn't here, but in the 2020 ordinance, it said it transfers all the, was in the salary ordinance. It said it transfers all of the clerk's duty to this new position, which we quickly went back and clarified at the time, because you cannot do that under the reorganization. So we had a gentleman's agreement, if you will, that really we were only talking about the clerk of the town council duties.
And this just kind of memorializes that gentleman's agreement and codifies
Correct.
everything and puts it on paper. So.
Correct.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any other questions for Heather? Again, this is a first reading, right? I mean, I would certainly anticipate additional dialogue on this one as well. If there are no other questions, I would make a motion to introduce ordinance 2023-05 on first reading.
Second.
Second by Counselor Trailer. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. Coming into the home stretch, are there any other matters from counselors? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second by Vice President Burke, second by Counselor Choi. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 6 in favor, 0 opposed. The next regular town council meeting is scheduled for Monday, February 13th at 7:30 a.m. in the Zionsville Town Hall Council Chambers. Please note the date shift due to the Zionsville school winter break. So that will be this coming Monday. Final notice will be posted in compliance with the Indiana open door laws. Thank you.